Welcome back. Time to check in with our good friend Tom Mulcair. And our feature, of course, brought to you by the folks over at Guaranteed Industries. For high-efficiency Lennox furnaces and heat pumps, you know who to call. Guaranteed Industries at 514-342-3400. In business for more than 75 years. The folks you can trust. Guaranteed Industries, a Lennox premier dealer. So, Tom, first of all, welcome back. It's nice to have you here.
Good to be with you.
In your regular spot. And
Yep.
Today we started off with Jagmeet Singh. He came into the studio.
Yeah.
We had a chat just after 2 o'clock this afternoon. Don't know if you had a chance to hear any of that.
Well, I did, and I just heard some in the newscast.
Okay. By the way, for folks who did not hear it, we're going to replay that for you coming up just after the 5:30 news. But in the meantime, of course, a couple of questions we asked with respect to the supply and confidence agreement, the fact
Yes.
that he tore it up, et cetera, et cetera. Look, there's nothing very much different from what we've heard for the past couple of days, to be perfectly honest.
No.
But I also played back one of the clips, and I think you mentioned this morning with Andrew, where you basically said it kind of came out of the blue. And I asked the question of Jagmeet Singh. And interestingly, the one thing I did find out was he pointed to a couple of different issues that he had brought up that both the Liberals and Conservatives were not prepared to move forward with. And that was one of the reasons they decided to pull the plug now. What do you make of that?
Sounds like a retroactive justification. Look, he knew the day he signed this thing that he had no choice but to walk away from it at some point. He knew that. I've talked to people who were advising him at the time, and they all knew that was part of the equation. What they didn't do well is the preparation. You prepare the terrain. You talk to opinion leaders. You get people on side. You have them understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. The only thing we got from him was a press conference the day before where he stood on a picket line with the very capable local member of Parliament, Alexandre Boulris and Rosemont Patry, and they said, Justin Trudeau would never stand on a picket line. Well, if that's your sum total of explaining why you've worked with him for 2.5 years, but all of a sudden all that's changed and he doesn't deserve another chance. That's what Singh said. Justin Trudeau doesn't deserve another chance. And, he went pretty darn far. I mean, he was rough, in his terminology. So he slams the door on Trudeau. But then, as you just said, Aaron, he keeps leaving the door open to vote for Trudeau, his confidence in Trudeau. So I think that there are a lot of people in the NDP who are still scratching their heads over that.
So I asked this question with respect to what it would take to actually force an election call. In other words, when there's a motion brought on the floor for him to say, yes, we agree, here's what he said.
Well, I'm not going to
his shoes.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer a hypothetical on that. I'm going to look at each vote as it comes and make a decision on it. But I can tell you that this does set up an election between the conservative vision of Canada, where they want to tear down things like our pension, our healthcare. They want to let their corporate buddies rip us off. Or New Democrats want to build up our country.
Yeah, I try to stop him every time he's going to go into that because, of course, that's the boilerplate stuff. But,
of course, he never answered. Right?
Yeah, and he said, I won't answer a hypothetical. But, okay, look, how many things could it be? They're going to talk about not wanting to, to axe the tax, or it's about the economy. Do you put much credence in that kind of an answer?
No, and he'll vote down the government the day that he thinks he should. But we always forget that the Bloc Québécois has more than enough seats to keep the government in power. So if the Bloc doesn't find that it's in its own interest, to bring down the government, the Bloc will vote in favor of Trudeau shamelessly. But I think that the Bloc is filling its oats. Look, here's what I'm getting from the ground, from a bunch of different sources about LaSalle, Aymar, Verdun, that it's a three-way race amongst the governing Liberals, the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP. The Bloc Québécois is doing better than people were expecting them to because, frankly, François Blanchet isn't exactly the most exciting guy in the world. But Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, who heads up the Parti Québécois, has a real good head of steam. And people like him. They like the PQ again. He's building up his own support. So some of that is rubbing off very positively onto the Bloc. People are rediscovering their separatist roots, and that's going to help them. The NDP's got a very good candidate, somebody you and I know well, and he really is a good guy and a good candidate, Craig Sauvé. And I'm getting reports that he's doing really well. What we were also getting is that on the doorstep, people are saying, so I like the NDP. I voted for you in the past. Why do you keep voting for Trudeau? And that was one of the reasons that Singh decided to walk away from the deal. Now, why would he put so much importance on a local election? Because the other one, which is a strong NDP riding, it's called Elmwood Transcona in Winnipeg, held by Bill Blakey and then his son Daniel Blakey for election after election. The problem? They're expected to lose that one. So Singh really needs a victory on Monday the 16th, and he's hoping for it, of course, in LaSalle, Imard-Verdun.
I asked the question then, we've talked so much about how much this by-election here means to the Liberals, right? If they lose this one after St. Paul's, then what does Justin Trudeau do? But I kind of posed that question as well, which is, what if the NDP loses both of those? Then what does that say about Justin, or about Jagmeet Singh?
Justin Singh, that was a good.
Yeah, well, there you go.
But I think that it's the same. By the way, he was asked that question yesterday, and he gave the exact same answer as Trudeau. I'm heading the NDP in the next election.
Okay.
Well, if he gets wiped out in those two by-elections, I'm not so sure. That some people are not going to be looking south of the border and say, there is a way to hit refresh. It's what the Democrats just did. So, stay tuned. Look, those two by-elections, I've never seen two by-elections that are going to be so determining. I think that the Conservatives are probably going to take the Winnipeg one. The Conservatives are not even in play in LaSalle, Imard-Verdun. That would be like an earth-shattering event, but I'm expecting them to get like their typical Island of Montreal 10%. But watch the other three. It's like, the way I'm getting it from the ground, it's like 30-30-30 right now. Okay. One of them is going to pull ahead at the last minute. People will make up their minds, but it's going to be close.
All right, let me move on and talk about something in our own backyard here. So just a day after Pierre Fitzgibbon calls it quits, François Legault, as promised, names Christine Frechette, who was the immigration minister, to take over energy and economy. And I can't believe this one, Jean-François Roberge, to take over immigration. The man who said there's too much English on the streets of downtown Montreal is now immigration minister.
Absolute disaster. But this is François Legault. You look at who he says his favorite author is. I mean, this guy really leans heavily right nationalist, very old. This guy would have been right at home with the 1950s version of the Union Nationale, which is basically what he's running now. So Jean-François Roberge has been his language minister. He's messed that up. We saw that this summer with his directive that he had to withdraw. He was the education minister, and he did such a poor job that Legault had to pull him out of there and put him in a minor file like language. And now he's giving him immigration. Look, if Legault has not figured out by now that Jean-François Roberge is the type of minister who does not know the substance of his files. He doesn't know the details. He's always caught off guard. The one thing that I regret about naming Christine Frechette Super Minister of the Economy is that she was such a darn good immigration minister. She didn't kowtow to the intolerance, and indeed, in the case of some racism, she had a very even keel on this stuff. She was talking with other provinces, working with the feds. She was she is super smart. So all kidding aside, I'm very glad for her, and probably for the province on the economy. I'm super sad that on a key file where we're going to have a lot of friction, Legault has given it over to the fumbling Jean-François Roberge. I find that a tragedy, a real tragedy.
All right. By the way, I understand there was a meeting today between Jean-François Roberge and Mark Miller, so we'll see what we hear about that next week.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Love to have been a fly on the wall.
I guess. Let me go to this last story today. Look, I know we've talked about Pascale Dery before, and I think maybe the one opinion we share in common is she's been very disappointing, I think, right, as far as that file is concerned.
That's the most charitable thing we can say. Yeah.
Well, so today I'm going to say disingenuous, because I think that's what it was. We find out today from CJEPs here that the government has basically frozen their money. Yes. And then the minister comes out and makes it seem as if, the money's frozen because we can't just keep, going ahead and agreeing to all these projects. But this is money and projects that had already been agreed to in the past. This is not expansion.
No.
So what's this about?
This is about the cuts that are coming in the Quebec government to try to reel in the deficit, which is ballooning. At last budget, it was supposed to be $11 billion. Legault thought he was being clever. He figured he'd have it down quite a bit before the next budget. It's looking like $11 billion might be the real number. So he's just given the order to Éric Girard to cut. Remember how he got elected, saying that Philippe Couillard was all about austerity? Yeah. Well, these guys are cutting blindly right now. Look, let me tell you a little bit about the ministry that is run by Pascale Dery. There was a review done by the Treasury Board of the performance of all of the ministries in the Quebec government. There was only one ministry in the Quebec government that was given a failing grade. For 20 points, which ministry was it, and who's the minister? It's Pascale Dery's Ministry of Higher Education. Yeah. It's a disaster. Everything that she touches in terms of public administration since she got there has just been catastrophic, frankly.
But it's a bit of a slap in the face to English education, isn't it, to some degree?
Well, to all stations. Well, first of all, the McGill, of course, Concordia tax that she announced a year ago, that was the worst. And now we're finding out that even though Bishops thought it had a side deal that would save it, Bishops has gotten hit by this thing quite a bit as well. And beyond that, these are budgets that were granted by the Quebec government. She's talking about a bottleneck. What a bunch of hooey. It's simply the fact that the government had allotted the budgets. They started doing projects following all the very complex rules because, believe me, before you spend a dime, especially since the Charbonneau Commission, you don't fool around. You got to have stuff approved up, down, and sideways and checked 3 ways to Sunday. No. What have we got? We got Pascale Dery coming up with a lame excuse that doesn't hold water, saying it's about a bottleneck. It's pure malarkey.
I would guess the only thing we can imagine now, as you're saying, is as the Premier begins to cut left and right after dealing with an $11 billion deficit, chances are he won't be sending out checks to all Quebecers to win the next election.
No, I think that was the beginning of the end. I mean, when he gave out those checks and gave the tax decreases at the same time, everybody said, 2 very good ideas. You just can't do them both at the same time. And he went ahead and did them both at the same time because, don't you know, he had a big majority, so he could do whatever he wanted.
Let's say that was then and this is now, or whenever now is going to be. Hey, Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. All right.
You too.
Tom Mulcair, who, by the way, is back every weekday morning at 7:40 with Andrew Carter.